then we will begin our meeting. Good morning. I'm Linda Collins, president of Clayton Library Friends, and it's my pleasure to welcome all members and guests to our quarterly meeting. We today have a great speaker that we can't wait to get to hear. But before that, we have an important piece of business that we need to do, and that is elect our nominating committee. Our nominating committee is very important because those are the folks who help make sure that we select the excellent leaders for next year and the next year that will keep this organization going. So Risa Hennings is the board representative to the nominating committee this year. Risa, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Linda. Hello, everyone. Glad that you're here at the meeting. And our bylaws indicate that a board member is to serve on the nominating committee, not as chairman necessarily, but just to serve and to get the committee, get a slate organized and to call the first meeting. So I'm happy to announce the slate. As you can see here, these folks volunteered. Thank you for volunteering. We have Mazzella Bolden, John Doro, myself, Mary Hollis, and Tom Matchett. So each of you members needs to vote on this slate, and then we will be ready to go and find the candidates to fill the offices for the 23-24 term. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Risa. So Jessica, if you will put up a poll, we ask that only members vote on this, and you do not need to sign in. You just need to answer the poll, and we're going to leave it up for just a second to make sure everybody gets a chance. We do have a quorum. Thank you, Jessica. We can ask everybody to go ahead and answer the poll. And we believe we are just about there.
Yes, I'm gonna leave it about 10 more seconds. It's been 52 seconds. So if you'll go ahead and get your vote in. Okay, last call.
Yeah,
Are you
as a
ready to
co-host,
close?
I wasn't able to vote. So
Right.
please
Yeah,
count me as a
there are three of us
approver.
that can't vote officially, but we know our votes.
Okay, well, are you ready for me to end the poll?
Yes.
Okay.
Will it still be available to people to vote or no?
No.
Oh.
We've ended. Yeah. So Jessica, did you share the results?
I did. Are you able to see them on your screens?
I can see it. I clicked on
Yes.
poll, and I can see that there were 24 of 24.
So we have a resounding approval of our nominating committee. Thank you very much, everyone. And so Sue, if you want to move to the next slide. Thank you, everybody, for voting. And thanks to the nominating committee members. So Nick, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Linda. Well, we have the honor and the privilege of having with us today Jean Wilcox Hibben, Ph.D. Jean is a native of the Chicago suburbs, so she has that in common with our manager, Susan Kaufman. Jean now resides in Southern California, where she was a college professor for 13 years, and she taught speech communication. And like a lot of us, she retired to pursue her passions, family history and folklore, and she has a doctorate in folklore. She's a national speaker, the former director of the Corona, California Family History Center, president and webmaster of the Corona Genealogical Society, and past president of the Southern California chapter of the Association of Professional Genealogists. So Jean keeps busy with her association activities, as you can see. She's also been on the boards of the Genealogy Speakers Guild, International Society of Family History Writers and Editors, and the Association of Professional Genealogists. I meant to ask you about this one, Jean, so we're going to have to save this for the question and answer period, but you were the lead researcher for the first season of Genealogy Roadshow.
Mhm.
And she writes the Anti-Jeff column for The Informer, the newsletter of the Jefferson County, New York Genealogical Society. So, Jean, we look forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Nick. It's been kind of fun having a little bit of time with you guys yesterday and today. Unfortunately, every time I hear somebody read my bio, it makes me so tired. I don't know if I have enough energy to go on from there, but I will persevere. So let me go to my sharing the screen thing, and let's see if we can get this happening. I prefer to share the screen without me on it. That's way too much stuff to look at or something like that. All right, let's see. Is that shared at this point, sort of?
It is shared, yes.
Yay. Okay, now let me share it so that it actually looks decent. Maybe let me do that. Let me try it again. Sometimes these computers need a little bit of coaxing.
Okay.
So here we go. And we're going to talk about who is that, why your ancestors associated with apparent strangers. Now, my tendency is to use case studies, generally case studies that have some element of humor or irony in them so that people don't fall asleep. And also so that maybe you get a laugh and maybe even see something that reminds you of one of your ancestors where you say, oh, good, I'm not the only one. So today we're going to remind you that there is no recording permitted except by the society, of course. Audio, video, still, no, don't do any of that stuff. And I appreciate it. If you see something you say, that is really something I'd like to have a copy of, let me know. And if it's something that I have the copyright authorization to share, like I created it, then that's not a problem. So there we go with that. Now, the next thing we have to remember is we're not going to be doing questions during the presentation because that would be would throw off my timing off if nothing else. So we're going to ask you to hold the questions until the end, put them in the chat box. I don't know if you have a question answer box. I didn't look carefully on that, but put them in the chat box so that they can be read afterwards, or if we have the time and availability, we'll open it up according to the dictates of those who are running the meeting. So what is this all about? Well, I don't know about you folks, but I've had situations where I have looked at documents or other elements regarding family history, and I have said, I don't know these names. Who are these people? And so that's really what it's about. Have you ever found a strange name on your, at the same location as your ancestor, maybe on the same record, maybe the same document? Possibly this would be a census record. Are there strangers living in your family's home? Or how about document witnesses? How about in a cemetery plot? Boy, that seems to be the epitome of infiltrating somebody's family by all of a sudden appearing in the cemetery plot. And I've had that happen actually a number of times. So those are the three major things we're going to look at today. And sometimes investigating these people can actually give us leads to our own family history. Sometimes they don't give us anything more than more questions. But let's take a look, first of all, how to get going. Now, I'm sure you all know this one. In all cases, we work from the known to the unknown. That is the most efficient way of handling things. Sometimes it's really tempting to just jump right into a family history problem from somewhere in the past and then realize we have no idea if we're in the right family. So that's why we start with the known and go to the unknown. So we're following our family with as much knowledge about them as possible. Well, take a look at census records. I find those to be some of the most fun things because they not only have names of people, but often tell us something about them, which is very helpful. So I'm a Wilcox, my family Wilcoxes, but apparently I don't go back all the way to people that are, I'm sorry, I'm trying to turn the volume off my cell phone off, otherwise it might ring. Anyway, so I'm curious about this woman here in this family, the Messenger family, Jedadiah Messenger and his wife and children. And I love the children's names. I mean, we've got Elvira and Eldu, I don't even know what that name is, and Elliot. And I think these are great names. If you're going to name your kids, naming them Mary is just really hard to find them. But I can do first name searches on the children in this family, but that's a different subject altogether. But what I'm wondering about is this woman here who's 59 years old. Her name is Mary Wilcox, and she just appeared here. So who is she? I'm looking at the Messenger family. I'm trying to find out more about this stranger, and I'm identifying that Jedadiah apparently married a woman named Mary. Of course, this is the 1860 census, so it doesn't tell us what the relationships are. That's what's so helpful with some of the more recent census records. We can find out who the person is. Here it just says, well, here's Mary Wilcox, age 59. There she is. She's born in New York. I know virtually nothing about her except she was born about 1801. And I said, well, there's another Mary here who was born about 1834. Now that's a possibility they're related, but we never want to jump to conclusions, right? Don't assume anything. And the most likely possibilities of this woman, obviously she could be a boarder, but if she might be related, she could be the mother of the wife. She could be the mother remarried of the husband. I say remarried because she doesn't have the same name. She's not a Messenger, she's a Wilcox. The aunt of either the wife or the husband. The sister of the wife, she's kind of old to be the sister of the wife, but that's not impossible. The sister of the husband, same situation there. The marriage record for Jedadiah Messenger, because that's what I want to look at now. And you may notice that I'm spelling Jedadiah differently, and that's because his name is spelled differently in almost every record I have of him, which is, that's kind of adds to the mystery and the uniqueness of our family when they don't, how boring it is to spell the name the same way all the time. All right, so I found a marriage record for Jedadiah Messenger. He was 25 years old when he married, and he married Mary Wilcox, but not the same Mary Wilcox that I'm trying to find, because this person is 18 years old, and both of them lived in Decatur, Michigan. Well, now, of course, right now you're jumping to the thought that, that Mary Wilcox is the mother of this Mary Wilcox. Possibly, all right. The bride, born in 1835, is also named Mary. She's could likely be that they're sisters, but not really. I mean, consider how confusing it would be to have two children in your family, both named Mary. Actually, I have a family that's like that. The women were named Maria, one Maria Eva, one Maria Anna, and they both moved to the United States from Germany, and both of them went by Mary. Thankfully, they married different people, and I could tell them apart that way because of their married names. Anyway, that's a separate story altogether. Well, the most probable is that Mary Wilcox the elder is Mary Wilcox Messenger's mother. So we want to check. We don't assume. Check the 1850 census for Mary Wilcox. There are no records for such a person on any Michigan census. All right. How about looking for her Mary Wilcox on 1850 census, but no location? Boy, that sure would open up a lot, wouldn't it? I'm going to go to FamilySearch for that. And I'm going to go to the records portion. And when I do that, I go into the searching of the historical records. And apparently Mary Wilcox was born in 1801 is not a unique name. What a surprise, right? Even the addition of New York birthplace does not narrow it down enough. So I don't know where this Mary might have been 10 years earlier. in 1850, 10 years earlier in 1850, sorry. So I scroll down for more browsable collections. I love browsing collections. The only problem is I get hung up looking at things that have nothing to do with my family, but they're just interesting. Anyway, if I scroll down, I can go into, no, I'm not going to look at the Alabama state census. That wouldn't make much sense. I'm going to go down to the United States Census, look at the whole country. She was born in New York, so I'm thinking the whole country here. And I can open that up, and I'm going to put as much information I can put in that I know is accurate, or at least from what I've been told so far is accurate. So I've got her name, Mary Wilcox, and New York birthplace. I'm giving it a 10-year range there, 1795 to 1805 for the birth. And I don't know where she was living in this at this time. So there are 27 Mary Wilcoxes that come close to that. And wouldn't you know it, the one that's the first one listed, this rarely happens with me, by the way, happens to be my Mary Wilcox, or the one I'm looking for. So I have here some options. I can look at the pedigree. That's these little icons on the right tell us a little bit more about what is going to be found if I click on them. So I can look at the pedigree, the family tree of this person. I can look at the actual image, that's what the camera means, or I can look at just the transcription of who this person is. Now, while the transcription can be interesting, it often leaves off information that we'd like to see. However, sometimes it gives me some information that might not be anywhere else, and I tend to start with that. In this case, I have her page, her information here, her name, sex, et cetera, et cetera. We're all familiar with these things. And the birth year estimate of 1800. When I scroll down further, I find other people on this record. So we're looking at other people that are in the same household, we hope. And we have a husband, looks like a husband, Peter. And then we have Luther and Mary. That's another Mary Wilcox. We got two Mary Wilcoxes in the same household in New York. This could be what we're looking for. So I do want to view the document, and I do. I bring it up so I can look at it, and I love how we can adjust the size, because I have discovered as I get older that more and more of these places are making their document images much smaller. I don't know why they do that, but anyway, I always have to raise it up a bit, and I can print it, I can download it, I can adjust the image. Sometimes that helps, by the way, in seeing things if I change it to white on black instead of black on white. And it tells me the citation for this information. No, there we go. And I can copy it. All I have to do is click copy it, and then I can put it into my documentation if I so desire. If it's the right person. I certainly will do it if it's the right person. So here's the 1850 US Census. I've got it a little bit larger now and edited a bit here. And there we have Peter Wilcox, who's 50, and his wife is the same age. Well, I'm assuming it's his wife. Probably is, but we can't be certain. Then we have Luther, Mary, Sarah Ann, and Martha in the household. Now, is it the correct Mary Wilcox? Golly, I hope so. So I need to check a few others just to be sure. I'm going to look for Peter Wilcox's will, if I can find something like that. I'm going to look for other children. Where did they all end up? Obituaries for any and all of them. All that's important. Now, I did find Peter Wilcox's will. You can tell by looking at his signature there towards the bottom that he doesn't look like he's got really good penmanship, but he would be good as an enumerator, wouldn't he? With the penmanship like that, he'd fit right in. Well, the will was made the 9th of June, 1852, and it was in Van Buren County, Michigan, and he died 3 days later. Ironically, but it's interesting to note that about 3 weeks earlier, they actually moved from New York to Van Buren County. I've heard that it was for Peter's health, because he was on the border of Ontario, Lake Ontario, which is pretty cold. So instead they moved him over to the border of Lake Michigan. I grew up on Lake Michigan, and it's freezing there. So I guess they wanted him to die real quickly or something. Poor guy. Well, I did find more information about the family in a biographical book. Some people call them mug books. Some call them brag books. These are books put out by the community. It could be the county. It could be the city, sometimes even the state. And it tells a whole lot about individuals. Now, most of the individuals, I shouldn't say most, many of the individuals whose names appear and their bios paid to have that happen as sort of an advertisement method. If I tell what they do for a living and it's printed here, then look at all the people that are going to know who these folks are. And that's a pretty big biography Luther got. Luther is the daughter, that would be weird. Luther is the son of Peter and Mary. And so when I look at this, I find all kinds of things, that he is the son of Peter Wilcox, who's a native of Vermont. All right. And it says that the mother, this is Mary Wilcox, her maiden name was Mary Euchre. She was the daughter of George Euchre, veteran of the Revolutionary War, and was also born in Montgomery County, also born because, according to this, Luther was born in Montgomery County, and that they trace their ancestry back to England. So I've got a whole lot of information here about Luther, and if that other Mary Wilcox that married Mr. Messenger is connected to this family, as I suspect, then I've got the information about her family too, because they're brother and sister. Of course, are they full brother and sister? I'd have to do a little more research on that. But this tells me a whole lot of information about the family. And it tells us that the mother of our subject, after the death of her husband, this would be Mary Wilcox now, remained a widow for a period of 30 years, continuing a resident of Van Buren County, this state, where her death took place in 1882. That's why she was in Van Buren County in 1860. And then it mentions that his sister is Mary M., the wife of J. Messenger. Well, I think that's supposed to be Messenger, and is a resident of Van Buren County. So I've got enough information here that I'm just about ready to put the whole thing in ink. So it also mentions that Luther had a brother named Calvin. So that would also be Mary's brother, I think. And I found information about Calvin also in Michigan, and a different area, but in Michigan. And so I found his obituary, and it gives me information about him. And it says that he leaves 3 sisters at his death. He left 3 sisters, one of them being Mrs. Mary Messenger of Marcellus, Michigan. Okay, so this is 1911, so they may have made another move, it looks like. Well, okay, so when I research a woman on the census, at least with the Messenger family, what I got is the identity of the wife's maiden name, which is Wilcox, the identity of the wife's parents, Peter and Mary, and also the identity of the wife's maternal background, a Revolutionary War soldier, George Euchre. I can, if I'm connected to this family, this woman, especially Mary, I can possibly get a DAR membership. I have to get a whole lot more information, but don't forget to look into the treasure chest of a stranger on the census. It really could be somebody that is connected to your family. All right, even identified relationships can require further investigation. Now, a person on a census may be related to the husband or the wife. Of course, also could be not related at all. And I have a bunch of family that took in boarders. It seems like most of my family in a particular time period, the early 1900s, took in boarders, and I found strangers there all the time, but I have researched almost all of them to make sure that they weren't also a family member. Relationships that are listed are supposed to be to the head of the household. Now, I say supposed to be because we know sometimes things are messed up a little bit and it's not exactly the way it should be. So if it says mother-in-law, it could be from a prior marriage. All right. So the sister-in-law could be the wife of the husband's brother or the sister of the husband's wife. Got to allow for either option. And keep in mind that surnames change with marriages, with I know all kinds of things. I have one family member whose name was Strauss, as far as I knew, but when she was buried as Strzezuski. And that's because that was the original form of the name, and she went back to it. Different story altogether there too. Okay, so now I'm at 1900, the census of Clay, Onondaga County, New York. And here I have the Gates family. Let me put that up so it's a little more legible. We have George Gates, who's the head of the house, and his wife is Sarah. They have a son, Claude, and a daughter, Florence. Now, also in the household is Isaac Freeman, and he's listed as uncle. Now, according to the way the enumerators are told to do it, as I just mentioned, is that relationship, uncle, is to be to the head of the household. So it would be George's uncle Isaac. And if that's the case, we would expect that Isaac would be probably the brother of George's mom because of the difference in surname, possibly. I'm wondering who Isaac Freeman is. So as I just mentioned, I just already said this. Okay, so Isaac was George Gates's uncle, according to this. And a search for George Gates, age 11 or 12, in New York, resulted in the family of George and Lucy Gates. Now, you don't need to even try to remember this because actually it didn't go back to him at all. All right. So I looked this family up. I found that the family of Lucy Gates, I'm looking for her to have been born of Freeman with a brother Isaac, right? Because this would be the mother of George. But I didn't find that. I found nothing that took me to there. So I thought, well, okay, if I can't find it by looking at the family members, let me look at Isaac himself. All right? I got to go to the 1880 census and see what I can find about Isaac. And I searched for Isaac and I found him. There he is, all the way down there at the bottom. And this is, like I said, 1880 census. And he's in the household of Abram Freeman with his wife, Betsy, and Amos, Carrie, Sarah, and I think that's Eugene Freeman, the children. And there's Isaac, who is 58, and he is the brother to the head of the household. So that would make him Abram Freeman's brother. Well, they have the same surname, so that's good. But how did he end up in the Gates home? That's a good question. We have Sarah here, and Sarah was born about 1868, and that agrees with the Sarah Gates of the 1900 census. Isaac was born about 1821, which agrees with the Isaac Freeman of the 1900 census, also living in the Gates household. Well, you know, I'm curious about trying to track him as a Freeman, so maybe I find some other family information. And I did find in that area, Onondaga County, a tombstone where an Isaac Freeman is buried with in a grave. The tombstone covers both Edwin Freeman, his young nephew, and Abram Freeman. So this is looking like I may have the right guy, and I could probably find the whole family with a little bit of time and effort. So I found the plot. I'm excited. Bricks are being removed from my wall. Isn't it neat when you see the bricks coming out? Ideally, you take the bricks out from the top down because otherwise it'll all fall on top of you. And I don't know about you, but I've had some times where, yeah, they have fallen on top of me and I got to go back and build the wall again and then start trying to, track a different direction. Well, the maiden name of George Gates's wife is Sarah, and she's a Freeman. She was the daughter of Abram Freeman. And Sarah's mother was Betsy. Now I need to determine Betsy's parentage. You know, the funny thing about genealogists, we get this information. Look, and I finally got George's wife's maiden name is Freeman. I'm so excited. And I don't want to sit there and enjoy that for any more than a few moments before I want to go find out more. Genealogists are so greedy that way. We just got to find out more. Well, let's move to some documents and see how the witnesses and documents can be family members or not. All right, so we'll look at some major events such as marriages, deaths, baptisms, and we'll start with marriage. Now, I've been looking at records in English because my assumption is that y'all speak English or read English or have some connection to that language, but we can find the same kind of situation happening in other locations. So this is from a Catholic Church record. It's in Latin. Don't let Latin scare you. Latin is just English with a twist, maybe 2 or 3 twists. So here is the marriage record between Francisca Matthiam, in other words, Francis Matthias, Hollander, and Anna Maria Menz. All right, now I'm looking through here. By the way, when you get these records, if you find them on the microfilms, I should microfilms because I'm still old school. You find a digitized copy of it. It doesn't have that little translation that I've set through this document. It comes out just as in the Latin, and then you need to take a little time to work with it. Don't let it scare you. Latin is quite manageable, except for the fact that I got a D in the class when I was in junior high, but that's neither here nor there. All right, I find right away that I have a surname that matches Anna Maria Braun, who is the mother of, I lost myself, who is the mother of the bride. And I look here and it says that one of the witnesses is someone named Johann Braun. By the way, Joanne is not Joanne, it's Johann. It's a male. And I'm wondering, how are these people related? Now, Johann Braun, just in case you were wondering, is John Brown. Now, I don't know about you folks, but I've found a lot of John Browns that are not connected to each other at all. In fact, I have a granduncle named John Brown. So are those Brauns related? And maybe this will give me another line for family members. Anna Maria Braun is the mother of the bride and wife of Michael Menz. Johann Braun is one of the witnesses. We just saw that. Now, I have to remember that the marriage took place in February 1828. Why is it important to remember that? Because if I'm finding John Browns that have died before that date, that means that they're not people that are witnesses on that marriage record. So you just cannot have witnesses that are dead. They may be there witnessing, I don't know, but they aren't expected to sign for that. And so Anna Maria Braun's grandfather is Johann Sebastian Braun, but he died in 1739. Anna Maria Braun had 3 brothers named Johann. Once you get a good name going, they just like to keep it going. So we have the Johann Massilius Braun, born in 1757. Johann Braun, born 1759. We have Johann Valentin Braun, born 1766, died 1829. He could still make it. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at signatures. I'm going to use the signature comparison to help identify which Braun it is. If no clarification is provided. And sometimes it does tell you this is a brother-in-law or this is a nephew. But in this case, it didn't give me that information. And by taking all the John Braun signatures I could find, comparing them to that particular one there, when I know the relationship, I pretty much have him identified. We'll just leave it at that. And I'm going to move on to deaths. So don't forget, use signatures to help you identify who people are. Now, death registration, certification statement. Oh, I did this again. I got just something from Germany. This is in German, and I know it's completely illegible, and I have tried to get a better copy of this, but it has been not forthcoming. So what I'm looking for, this is a death registration of a little child. I thought that I had that in there. Oh, yes. Maria Mueller, who's 7 months old when she died. Now, who were her parents? Wilhelm Mueller, who's deceased, and Anna Maria Moore. Now, we're expecting that when Wilhelm Mueller passed away, he'd already impregnated Anna Maria, his wife, Anna Maria Moore Mueller, but not positive of that, right? So one of the, let me go back here. I thought I had a circle around it. I guess I don't. Down at the bottom of that document, you see J.J. Tenee, T-H-E-N-E-E, accent, IQ. And I look at that and I say, who is that person? Who's the other person? I don't know who any of those people are. How is Johann Joseph Tenee related to the baby and the parents? Okay. So this is one of the witnesses, Johann Joseph Tenee. How is he related? I want to know that. Oh, I did circle it, just in a different location. So I start investigating. Bonn, Germany. Lots of really great records. Not always the best that comes through when we copy them, obviously. I'm going to look at marriage records for Johann Joseph Tenee. Whoever he married, it doesn't have that. That's one of the things about not just in Germany, but in a lot of locations, you won't find the wife's name listed. It's enough to just list the husband's. I'm going to look at relatives of the parents of the deceased child. I'm going to look any documents, any family documents or records. I'm going to scour them for more instances where this guy's name appears, so that maybe it'll tell me who he is. Well, in doing that search, I found the marriage record for Thomas Mueller, son of Wilhelm Mueller and Anna Maria Moore. Yeah, the same Wilhelm Mueller and Anna Maria Moore that were parents to that baby that died. Now, Thomas Mueller's wife is Elisabetha Huberta Tanay, the daughter of Johann Joseph Tanay and Adelaide Cremerius. So this is telling me we got a connection here through this woman, Elisabetha, and this man, Thomas, who is the son of, apparently the brother of the kid that died. Right? Now, who cares? Well, you might care if it's your family. So family records and other documents, because I did a lot of scouring. And by the way, I have all the films for Bonn, Germany at the Corona Genealogical Corona Family History Center. Not all of them are online, by the way, like you cared. Okay. How about Thomas Mueller? He was an apprentice to Johann Joseph Tanay. Mr. Tanay owned a button factory in Bonn, Germany. Now, Johann Joseph's wife was Adelaide Cremerius. She died in March of 1844. Anna Maria Mueller's husband, Wilhelm, died in June of 1844. And note, Johann did not marry Anna Maria, but they knew each other. All right? The baby Maria Mueller was born November 1844, died June 1845. Thomas, who's the son, married Elisabetha, daughter of Johann Joseph, in November of 1850. I look at all the dates here, and this is what I'm intrigued by. And the reason this became an issue for me is because Thomas Mueller and Elisabetha Tanay are my great-great-grandparents. But family information, the stories, y'all, any of you have stories that may not have proved out as factual? Boy, I can write books on that. And I looked at these people as having known each other only shortly before Elizabeth married Thomas. But when I look at this entire time period, they apparently, and especially since Johann Joseph was one of the testifiers or witnesses that signed about the death of baby Maria Mueller, I said, you know what? These families knew each other a lot longer than the family identification or stories have played out. So does that matter? It might. So I'm thinking this is something that may require a little more time and effort. Why would that happen? Because Elisabetha, before she married Thomas, had a baby out of wedlock. And my question has always been, was it Thomas's? Well, I'm still working on that one. All right, how about the informant on a death certificate? And it's so nice when that person is identified. This is the death certificate for Carl Hone. I'm back into English, aren't you happy? Okay, back into English here with the decedent Carl Hone. He was a cousin to my great-grandmother. And he was a decorator of chinaware. He died out here where I live, in the area where I live is Long Beach. And the informant is Mrs. Lucille H. Leibarger. Now, this is all relatively recent. We're talking about 1947, I think it is. And so this is relatively recent. And I'm kind of curious about this stuff because it is possible that some of my relatives live near me. That would be really cool because let me tell you, I haven't got many relatives out where I live in Long Beach, in Southern California. So what are some search options? I'm going to go look at Long Beach information. And I looked at the 1930 census for Mr. Hone and Mrs. Leibarger, I guess it said. I'm going to look for cemetery information. And I'm going to start with the 1930 census. And here we have the Leibarger family, Kalen and his wife, Lucille. And then we have sons, John and Roger. And then living in the same household, Carl Hone, father-in-law. If this is accurate and it's been done correctly, that would make Carl Hone the father-in-law to Kaylin Liebarger, therefore most likely the father of Lucille. And Carl Hone's wife is Augusta, the mother-in-law to the head of the household. I got some discoveries here that are pretty exciting. Carl Hone's daughter was Lucille. His wife was Augusta. Now, Lucille had children, and their descendants do live in Southern California. At least one still did, last I checked. He doesn't care about genealogy. You ever have people in your family that don't care about genealogy? I don't know what's wrong with them, but oh well, that's his problem. Okay, his wife was Augusta, but on the death certificate, it said his wife was Marina. I need to investigate further. I have done that, by the way, and her name was Augusta Marina. I guess she probably went by Marina, but her legal name was Augusta. I guess. I don't know, but is the same person. Carl lived with his daughter and son-in-law, Kaylin Liebarger. And this led to the interment sites at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Long Beach. It had a different name, but then that cemetery sold out to Forest Lawn. Earlier census records had identified 2 sons and a daughter for the Hones, and they were Ralph Douglas, Calvin, and Lucille, called Lulu. And boy, does this ever make sense to me, because when I looked at the first census I found on the Hones, it says that the daughter was Hoo Hoo. And I could not figure out who would name their child Hoo Hoo. Now I went back and looked, and okay, I guess those could be L's, so that would be Lulu. You never know where your revelations are going to come from. I learned about the family that moved across the United States. They were in Illinois, they were in Washington, and I got in contact with the son of Lucille and Kaylin, whose name was Daniel Liebarger. He was named for his grandfather and his great-grandfather, Daniel Hone. Well, let's see about witnesses for the births and christenings. Who are these witnesses or testifiers? A lot of times, these are the people that are identified as godparents. I'm looking at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Minden, New York, and I find all that wonderful information. Thankfully, I was able to read it, so I'll give it to you here. This is for the parents, Edward Freeman, and his Frau, his wife, Regina. And it identifies their son as being Francis, who was born the 9th of February, 1816, and he was baptized the next month, almost 2 months later. And the testifiers, the persons that are the witnesses, are Isaac Guiwits and Jane Freeman. Now, I'm pretty sharp. I saw Jane Freeman and I saw the name Edward Freeman, and I said, boy, I bet you they got a relationship going there. But who on earth is Isaac Guiwits? Have no idea. So I'm searching. I'm going to look at believe it or not, the 1820 census. Those of you that are not aware of this, the 1820 census, actually from 1790 to 1840, are not detailed with all members of the household. I'll show you that in just a moment. I'm going to look for the 1820 census for Isaac Guiwits as well. Remember, this child was born in 1816, so the 1820 census is where the child should first be enumerated, even if the name isn't given. I'll look at regional history, other church records, anything I can find, actually. And I do find the 1820 census. I find Edward Freeman listed there. And it says that there's 1 male in the household, that 9 or under, 1 male that's 26 to 44, and then 2 females, 1 9 or under, and 1 26 to 44. It looks like it could be a married couple with 3 children, right? Perhaps. I don't know, but I'm marking it down as this is a possibility. So I keep notes on all this stuff to make sure that I identify people correctly. And when I'm making notes, by the way, I'm also identifying the exact document from which I got the information. In other words, I have the bibliographic information or the citation data for me to be able to find it again. And I didn't always do this until I discovered that I can't find things again unless I have really specific information. So take a few moments and do that, as excited as you are about finding something. Well, Isaac Guiwits, and I want to clarify here, in German, K's and G's are interchangeable. I guess it could be called Kerman. But anyway, so if I'm looking for Isaac Guiwits, I also need to look for Isaac Guiwits. I don't find him anywhere in New York on the 1820 census. Well, what are some possibilities? Maybe the misspelling doesn't produce anything because it's not close to the Soundex options. Soundex is a way to put names or places or people into classifications starting with the first letter and then a identification system for the last letters in the name. But if I'm looking for a K and then the other letters, I'm not going to find it if it's under G. So I have to look for more than one. Don't give up. Look for all kinds of options and then ask for somebody else to give an option or two that they might come up with. Isaac may have moved out of the state, though I've checked other states and I got nothing on him. He just sort of appeared and I had no idea who he is and anything about him except that apparently he married Jane Freeman. Well, I got in touch with a man named Ross Eckler, and sometimes the best ways to find things are to actually make human contact, either in person or telephone, as opposed to trying to do it via email or texts or Facebook messages and that sort of thing. Sometimes just talking to a person gets you further. And I got in touch with Mr. Eckler. He'd written a book on the early families of this particular location where the Freeman Guiwits people lived. And he told me about the Guiwits and Freeman families. See, I was pronouncing it Guiwits because of Kiewitz, but it is pronounced Guiwits. And obviously there's a multitude of different ways to spell it. Like I said, isn't it neat when they come up with all these different ways to spell things and then they can put them in the same record and get you completely confused? Oh, I think that's a fascinating thing. I wish I knew why they did it. Okay, here it is. Isaac Guiwits married Jane Freeman. Isaac was Regina Guiwitz's brother. Jane was Edward Freeman's sister. So what happened is all their children are double cousins, and that's how the families are related. Now that I have that information, I can go a whole lot further, and I'm super excited to do so. Document witnesses can help break through those brick walls. Don't ignore them. They can be super, super important. If they're not family members, there's a good chance they knew the family in one way or another. So, and don't forget to cite your sources as you go along. Don't say, I'll just catch that when I'm done with this and I'll go back and pick that up. No. Do it as you go along. It gets very exciting doing genealogy. It's really easy to rush to the next thing and discover that, oops, we should have done it a little differently to make note. Well, how about pension records for the military? These are really cool. Well, now I have another Guiwits name. This guy's name is Henry, and his name, his signature appears on a pension application that the widow of Edward Freeman, who is a veteran of the War of 1812, it appears on that application. Edward Freeman's first wife was Regina Guiwits. We've already looked at that. We saw that. What is the connection between the second wife, all right, because this is the widow of Edward Freeman, but a widow of Edward Freeman happens to be Edward's second wife, not Regina Guiwits. So why would she have some Guiwits be signing a pension application identifying as somebody who knows her? Who is he? Well, the initial document has a whole lot of information, much of it difficult to read, of course. And down here, if you see, I sort of underlined it, but it didn't copy very well, Henry Guiwits. And I got really excited when I saw that. I just thought, this is it. This is going to answer all my questions. And of course it didn't, but it got me on a different track that helped me find out other things. So we already know the relationship from what I already discussed. And Jane Freeman and Isaac Guiwits were the aunt and uncle of the children of their respective siblings. Yeah, going to look at local histories, historical histories. This is all in the handout, by the way. I didn't mention the handout, but these places to look are identified in the handout. Look at family letters and diaries and vital records and census records and pretty much anything you can get a hold of, right? Church records. And I went back to this same booklet, and I have to tell you, as much as I hate to admit it, Mr. Eckler did a fabulous job of connecting everything because he knew who everybody was. However, the citations are not there. I don't know what his sources are other than his own memory and family stories that he was aware of. Well, here's the information that I got about the Guiwits and Freeman connection, besides what I've already showed you. Isaac and his wife, Jane Freeman, moved to Oneida County. They had a son, Henry, born in February of 1821. And now this is going to get really convoluted, but when you're working with small communities, and keep in mind that they can't just hop in the Tesla and drive all over the place. What they have to do is get on a horse or take public transportation, maybe in railroad, probably not in 1821, but they could certainly get connected to each other. But because they live their lives in such small communities, it's not uncommon for brothers and sisters to marry sisters and brothers. It happens a lot. And people who knew each other end up marrying each other because it's in the pool. There aren't any other options, right? So Henry, who was born in 1821, married Susanna Louisa Carmelia Clock. Most of the time she's called Louisa, which really helps to know that at any rate. Louisa was the daughter of Philip Clock and Susanna Dillenbeck. Susanna Dillenbeck later married Edward Freeman, who was a widower, his wife being Regina Guiwits, who died about 1828, I think. Henry's cousins were the children of Edward Freeman, and two of those were William and Francis. All right, I found something that is like a treasure handed to me, and it wasn't where I would expect to find it. I have the Freeman relatives in my family tree, and was mentioned already. My family was from Jefferson County, New York. And in Jefferson, where by the way, there's a town called Clayton. I'm sure that really impressed you. But anyway, what happened is one of the Freeman brothers moved to Ypsilanti, Michigan. That was William Freeman. Now, he wrote letters, his brother back home with the family wrote letters to him, to William, in Ypsilanti. And this was one of those letters, a whole bunch of them, found in the Historical Society in Ypsilanti, Michigan. I never would have looked there if I hadn't been trying to separate one William Freeman from another. When I found these, or when they were found and then I was made aware of them, it was, I don't know, I've read these over and over again. It's like reading my family history. Oh, wait, it is reading my family history. What am I saying? This is written in 1847, I think. And this is the brother, Francis Freeman, in New York, telling about the family in, that William left behind when he left New York. And he says, Henry Guiwits and lady, which by the way is a very respectful way of stating it, not Henry Guiwits and his old lady. It's not like that. It's Henry Guiwits and lady has moved back to Boonville. That's in New York. And then it says, Henry has not sold his place in Canada. I read that and I said, this just opens up everything, because I've been trying to find these people in New York and I never thought to look in Canada. So now I have a whole set of new records that I just can't wait to get into. How exciting. Sometimes just one line makes all the difference. And if you have letters from the people back home, wherever back home was, whether United States, Canada, or overseas, if you get those letters, they can give you more information about your family, because what people did in their letters was say, here's what's happened since you've been gone. And they give all this wonderful information that you never would have thought to look for because you didn't know it was there. So historical societies where maybe non-direct line relatives lived, not a bad idea to check with them too. And this identifies Henry's birth. A toph, by the way, is baptism. And all the information here gets me started to move on to more and more. So these discoveries led to additional family documents, christenings, descendant identifications, census records for all the family members, cemeteries where ancestors are interred, understanding of the relationships among the Clock, Freeman, Guiwits, and Dillenbeck families. They're all through that area of New York. It was like gold. Well, you know what that's like. You all have had those same experiences. Now, my great-grandfather, Mueller, Frederick, otherwise known as Fritz, he had a little bit of a problem with the family because the family decided they didn't want him around for probably good reasons, but this particular set of letters does not actually tell me that he's really the shyster that I was told he was. Now, when he went into the Civil War, he was there for a very short period of time, and then he was discharged. He was discharged on a medical leave. So his military records are very, they're incomplete because he left the unit so soon after it started because of his injury. What he was trying to do was get his pension. And when they're trying to get pensions, these veterans will tell them anything and everything they can to increase the possibility. Now, I point this out specifically because if you have ancestors that served in, Civil War, sure, but also, I just showed you the one from the War of 1812. They send in letters and they send affidavits that were signed by people who may not even be related to you, but may give all kinds of information about the soldier who is considered an invalid, not invalid, invalid. So this is one of those affidavits that was written by a person who knew my great-grandfather. And this is William Schmeckabeer. All right, so he says he's being first duty sworn on oath states that he resides in the city of Chicago. Now, who is this guy Schmeckabeer? Why would I even pay attention to a letter in my great-grandfather's file from William Schmeckabeer? My dad really loved that name. He said it means taste the beer. He thought that was a great name. Well, it turns out that that person married into my family. A lot of times you're going to find surnames are different in these records, primarily because they don't want to make it look like the person writing the letter has a vested interest in the individual, the invalid getting his pension. So they will oftentimes seek people that they know well, but who, and even in the family, but who have a different surname. So I check other records trying to find out who this guy Schmeckabeer is. And I can't find him in the census records. And with a name like Schmeckabeer, of course, I have to be really flexible about how it's spelled. And I checked the marriage records and I get a hit. Sure, I sure did, in Illinois, no less. And there's the marriage certificate of, or license rather, of William Schmeckabeer to Tilly Mueller. And Tilly Mueller was born about 1877. Now, when I go back to look at more information from Fritz or Frederick's pension record, he lists all of his children that are alive. And included in that list is Ottilie Philippine Mueller, born July 9th, 1877. She went by Till. My family all knew her as Till. So when I found this and I found the Schmeckabeer information, I'm able to find the marriage record. And I still have to look for the divorce record because they didn't stay married too long. And then another signature on the Mueller pension popped up that looked interesting. A guy named Philipp Wolbert signed another affidavit. And I'm curious about this one. So I go doing some checking. I go to the 1880 census, you look at when things are generated. And on the 1880 census, I did indeed find Philipp Wolbert. He was an undertaker and his wife is Elizabeth. How interesting. Now, when I first saw this, I was excited because I found it, and I was getting training on working at the Family History Center. And my trainer said to me, now, you need to look at the other names in the area, the page before, the page after, to see if you recognize any names. I said, well, how would I do that? Because I know how to do it, but why? Because I wouldn't know any names. And she said, just do it. I said, okay. I do my homework. And so I did. And it didn't take long to find in the same apartment building, Fritz Mueller, otherwise known as Frederick, his wife Gretchen, her name is Gertrude, but he called her Gretchen, Ottie, another phrase for Ottilie, and Pauline, that's my grandmother, living in the same apartment building. I'm really bowled over. This just blew my mind. I wish my father was alive to have read all of that. I think he would have been excited to see it. So I check additional records, marriage record for Fritz or Frederick Mueller, and he marries Gertrude Wolbert, and Gertrude's parents are Philipp W. Wolbert and Eliza Tenay. We've seen that name before. I identified the Wolbert marriage, and there's Elizabeth married to Philip, and they got married in the United States, even though both of them had come from Bonn, Germany. Long story, not even going to make it short. I'm just not going to go there. But let me tell you about these discoveries from these strangers that just showed up. William Schmeckebeer was the first husband of Ottilie, also known as Ottie and Tilly and whatever else they felt like calling her. And her subsequent marriages have not yet been verified, still working on it. Philip was Frederick or Fritz's stepfather-in-law, and he married Eliza Tenay in 1865 after they came to America. So keep in mind, spellings may not be uniform. Gretchen is another word for Gertrude. Ottilie, well, there's some options for you. Wolbert, sometimes just a vowel works. You know, which vowel it is depends on the penmanship of the person filling out the information. And Tenay could be with two E's, could be with one E, and then it could be misspelled or misread as a U instead of an N. Elizabeth is changed her name to Elizabeth with a Z, but Philip always called her Eliza. And then Philip with one P or two P. Two P's in Germany, came to America, he Americanized it to one P. The differences in spelling can be the result of transcription errors, illiteracy, perception, nicknames, or changes from the home country. Mysteries are solved, but there's always another one just around the corner in a cemetery of all places. And this is a cemetery that is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I love visiting this cemetery. It just is just dripping with history. Forest Home Cemetery, it's got the Schlitz and Blatz families are there. I'm talking an awful lot about beer. I don't drink, but oh well. Anyway, this is the Hollander plot. And there's the father and mother in the back. You can see that. And there are these 4 stones also in that same plot. And they don't seem to have any connection. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, there's the dad, Adam Hollander, his wife, Carrie, their youngest daughter, Mary, who never married. And these people. So here we go. We got a father named Edward Warnke and mother named Hattie Warnke Valley, and a father named Alonzo Valley, and a mother named Emma M. Valley, and no place in there do we see the name Hollander, who's the name, which is the owner of the plot. Well, I look at this and I think, well, listen, we got a couple of people that died in 39. When were all these people born? Well, 1867, 1868, and 2 in 1869. So these are contemporaries. They probably knew each other. And then Edward and Emma both died. Now, don't look for some nefarious reason. They died from natural causes or whatever. They weren't killed off by Hattie and Alonzo, not that I know of. So Edward and Emma, after dying in 1939, were interred. And then when we look at this closely, we see that Hattie, who had been married to Edward, then married Alonzo. Still trying to figure out where we get this Hollander thing. And Emma, of course, had also been married to Alonzo. How do they connect? Check the valleys on the 1900 census in Milwaukee. And what do I find? I find Alonzo with Emma and their son Earl. All right. How far away are the Warnkes? Not far at all. They're essentially neighbors, went to the same church. And there's Edward, his wife Harriet, and then their son Gordon. I find a marriage record. I find marriage records for both Warnke and Valley. Here we go. Henry Warnke and Hattie Hollander. Now I see where it connects. And There you go. There we go. And the groom's father is John Warnke, and the mother's name is Hannah McGee. When I look at the Valley family, I find John Warnke and Hannah Mary McGee Warnke as being the bride's parents. So I've got, again, another brother and sister. Now, 1880 census, when I go to there, I find Hattie in the Hollander family, estimated to have been born 1869. So I'm really excited about this. I've got some information about this woman, what happened, and this was all listed in the records of the cemetery. Okay, not in a family record, nowhere else, but Forest Home was really generous and allowed me to just page through the cemetery records for the Hollander family. A barrier's been broken. All right, Hattie's the daughter of the plot owner. Edward and Emma, of course, are siblings. Hattie and Edward were married probably until his death in 1939. Emma and Alonzo were married probably until her death in 1939. And sometime after the deaths of their spouses, Hattie and Alonzo married each other. The marriage records for post-1930, I haven't been able to access them yet. And the 1940 census shows both as widowed, living in different homes. So you know what I did, don't you? I had to check this out on the 1950 census because I knew Hattie and Alonzo had been married, and then he had passed away before 1950 for sure. So what happened with Hattie? I found her in California, and I'm still trying to figure that one out. But she did return to Wisconsin, where she eventually passed away. So cemetery records give me this information about Emma, Edward, the whole thing I just already told you. So now these graves have been put here together because that's what Hattie wanted, was for them to all be together in death. I think that's so cool. Well, let's take a quick review. Use all the records at your disposal to unearth the identity of the stranger. Research the person as if he or she was one of your ancestors. It just might be the case. And right now, I've got Hattie in 1950 in Glendale, California, and I have no idea how she got here or why she got here. She's 80 years old, and she's living with a 70-year-old and a 60-year-old, also widows. So I'm going to be checking those ladies out, you can bet. Haven't done it yet. Haven't had the 1950 census at my disposal for more than a couple of months now. But don't be married to one particular way to spell a given name or a surname. Create timelines and do periodic reviews of the people in your findings. Use maps to search relationships between locations. Consider browsing census records and check the neighbors. Browsing is different from searching because you're going like we used to do with the microfilm, going page by page or screen by screen, as opposed to putting in a name and hitting search. Always work from the known to the unknown. When possible, do on-site research. I find more that way than any other way, I think. Cite your sources. Cite your sources. Cite your sources. If you would like to join my mailing list, by all means, email me and I'll be happy to add you. And I would also be happy at this point to discuss any questions you might have that for which I have answers. Turning it back over.
So I think you can hear me at this point.
I can.
And let me see if I can make it so you can also see me. There we go. Okay, so I don't know if Jessica's still on with us because she said she was going to have to leave early, but I'm going to use her name in vain a bit. Oh, good, Jessica, because Jessica, when we were discussing this, had said that the presentation, instead of who is that, should have a Texas spin, and it should be who dat. So
take it under advisement.
It's fine. I loved it just the way it was. It was wonderful.
In that vein, I had made some notes of some of your key points, and I was very happy to see that the points from your last slide are in your handout. So for those of you who were trying to scribble quickly, that last slide is in the handout. And I did post in the chat log the location of the handout, but it of course is on our event page for the Clayton Library Friends meeting. And but anyway, so before the meeting we were discussing some of your background and various things, and one of the things I wanted to ask you as sort of a follow-on to your presentation was you had made a comment about being 3/4 German, and we did see a lot of German folk in your examples, and 1/4 Texan. So could you expand on the Texan part, because we want to know who dat?
Who dat? Okay. Well, that Freeman family, my great-great-grandfather Nathan Wilcox married a Freeman, and they moved from New York to Michigan. That's when Nathan's father came along and died right afterwards. And then Nathan was a builder, and so he moved his family yet again from Michigan to Iowa. And in Iowa, he was he joined up. He was conscripted to the Union Army out of Missouri, even though he was in Iowa, because he was joining Bissell's engineering group, engineering regiment. And he went and did his thing in the Army, but he also then went on to go under government contract in Tennessee and loved it. He just loved Tennessee. It was wonderful. He had his family come down and join him, and they lived out their lives in Tennessee. But one of the family members was my great-grandfather, Edward Wilcox, who got in a little bit of trouble, shall we say, in Tennessee. Nothing he did was wrong. It's just what he did that was right that caused him to not be able to get a job. And so he moved to Texas with a young lady that he had met in Tennessee and her adopted family. And they went right to Dallas. And I'd love to just grab the date, they were there by 1880 and stayed there until the death. And he and his first wife, and then after she passed, his second wife, many of their children are still there. So that's how I got to be Texas. And my grandfather, of course, was from that family, and very Texan, who loved to tell us stories about his life in Texas. And I had it all pictured perfectly in my mind. And then I went to Texas and discovered it wasn't quite like that, but oh well. So that's how I got to be Texan.
Great, thank you. So I also want to ask Jessica's question for her, because I'm not sure if she can hear this or not, but she said she had to leave. She says, when working with a language that's new to you, like your examples of Latin and German, how do you learn enough in the beginning to decipher basic records?
Well, that's a very good question. And I just pulled up the chat to take a look, and the answer is pretty much right there. Find a word list. I think it's supposed to be word list on the FamilySearch wiki, and you can get the words that are most common in genealogical records.
Mhm.
Now, I mean, I have a ton of books on German, but my first problem was with a batch of letters written from Bohemia, and I could not read the writing. Even now I can't read it, but I enlisted assistance of people that did that for me, both here and in Germany. And they deciphered things that opened up everything. The letters just open up so much information. It's just, I boggles my mind, and I'm grateful that my parents had no idea what to do with a wastebasket. So they kept everything, including all the letters, even when they couldn't read them. They kept it all. And then I end up with this, of course, as soon as I wanted to do family history, they just unloaded on me and were thrilled to empty the attic that way. And I'm still sorting through, and it's been 40 years and still finding things. I read the same letter over and over and I get something new. So if you got letters, go for it. And check those historical societies, because sometimes they have the letters from your ancestors. Kind of a surprise. Happy.
I had
That's
a
a great
question.
point.
I had a question about how do you access all of those German records?
FamilySearch. That's it. FamilySearch. They're all there. Now, some of them you have to go into a family history center to access because of contractual agreements between the initial repository and FamilySearch as an organization, as a company.
Have you worked with this new German portal that they have going? I'm forgetting what the name is called, but
What, the Myers-Orts one, the Gazetteer?
no. It's they're publishing German records, and it's actually based out of Germany.
I have not worked with him, and I am aware of it because I'm a member of all these organizations that tell me about these
Mhm.
things. But I have gone through a time period while my husband was in the process of dying, and then after he passed away in January last year, I just am not working with things that are precise. Some of the things I talked about today, very precise, very easy to miss things. And I don't trust my brain right now. It's still on what they call widow's fog.
Mhm.
So I'm dealing with that and other things in life. So I
Mhm.
have put that on the gotta do this too list, and it will
Mhm.
happen. Just not happening today. But thank you for mentioning that, because I had forgotten about that one.
Our sympathies to you, Gene.
Thank you.
One other thing that I was impressed with was the example of signature comparison. Can you enlarge on that any? Where examples of how you've
Well,
done that?
yeah, first off, we have to remember when it comes to signatures, I would say prior to 1940s, most of the people that do witnessing are males. You don't find many females. So when you find a female signature and it's one of your ancestors, you might want to hang on to that, because that's pretty cool. But that's neither here nor there. But what I have done is, first off, I have to remember that signatures change. Peter Wilcox's signature on that will was horrible, because the man was literally dying. He was on his deathbed, and his wife is probably standing there saying, "Peter, you got to sign this. We got to sign this." And because he had some property still in New York to get rid of. But when I keep that in mind, and I'm looking at signatures, I have discovered, at least in Germany, probably everywhere though, if I have the same name as somebody else in my family, I'm going to write it. I'm going to have my name called, or a calling name that does not confuse me with the other person. I have a second cousin named Jean Ann, and my family and I have always called her Jean Ann, because if we call her Jean, it gets confused with me. We're very close in age.
Mhm.
So that's one of the things you have to remember. But when I look at my Hollander family, I have all these John Hollanders. John Adam Hollander was my great grandfather who moved to Milwaukee, and his signature is unique, separate from all of the ones in Germany, because he actually spells he doesn't spell the last name differently, but he wrote it differently. And then over time, it sort of evolved from an A umlaut to just an A in his last name. So I look at that and I say, okay, there's no umlaut there. So this is not my great grandfather. And his family, he had the Francis Matthias over and over again. That was John Adams' father, whatever. And over, that name is used, because you get two brothers and they marry and they want to honor their father. So they each name the first son after his
Mhm.
grandpa. And so we have all these people with the same name. So
Right.
one Francis Matthias goes by Franz, and he signs it Franz. Another one goes by FM for Francis Matthias. Another one goes by Matthias, and they all sign it differently. So when I'm trying to figure out which Francis Matthias is this record referring to, I go right to the signature, compare it to how I have identified them, and figure it's a good chance it's this guy. Now, doesn't mean that it's guaranteed, but at least it starts to call out those others that I don't know, I don't want to know about or whatever. So I don't know if that helps or not. And I need to
Yeah.
add something to the comment about how do I get going with the reading of the things. And I've seen that people put up translation services, online type stuff, and those many times work well. But we have to remember that if it says that a person is a miller, that could be a surname, but it could also be the profession, and maybe both. So what I've done, I took courses, and FamilySearch has a bunch of courses on handwriting, early handwriting, Gothic German handwriting, Spanish. There's an old Spanish handwriting. I can't even come close to reading it. Glad I don't have any Spanish family. But when I worked on the Genealogy Roadshow, I had to look at an awful lot of documents with an awful lot of strange handwriting and languages I didn't know. And I use people. I call in markers. I try to do favors for folks. And then I go back to them and say, hey, I have this Spanish document. Would you please translate that for me? And oh, so you helped me that one time. I guess I better do that. So I call in markers a lot.
Mhm.
And I'm not embarrassed to say it.
Yes. Well, that's good. It takes a village sometimes.
It does. It does. It's really
So-
nice if it's
so-
not the Tower of Babel, but yeah.
Yeah. So since you mentioned Genealogy Roadshow, that was another part of your bio that I failed to mention in our little pre-show. And of course, we have a softness in our heart for Genealogy Roadshow because they, in their third season, were here in Houston, and a lot of us got to go there and be a part of that. And so I was just wondering if you could expand on your Genealogy Roadshow experience a bit.
Well, I tell you, I can. Most of it takes. I have a whole presentation on some of the things that we had to deal with, but I will be happy to talk to you just a little bit about the Texas connection. What Genealogy Roadshow did the first season. I haven't worked with them since then because they got smart and followed my advice and hired genealogists from the various areas where things happened or documents would be found. And that's to their credit, because when they hired me and they wanted us all to be from in California, and I said, we're going to have to subcontract. And they said, oh, that's okay. They didn't realize that a whole lot had to be subcontracted because we just, we're not in a lot of the areas. And it's not like we can wait 6 to 8 weeks for a pension record from the National Archives. So anyway, when the first show of the first season was actually shown as the fourth show. Right? So it was Austin, was the first one. And they were trying to get stories for a program that nobody knew anything about. I mean, the people that worked on it did. But if you said, hey, Genealogy Roadshow needs stories, do you have any family stories that have not been proved? And they'd like to do that for you. But people didn't know what they were talking about. So what they were doing was they were getting, trying to get relatives of the crew. Do you know anyone who knows, who lives in Austin that might have this, that, or the next thing? And of course, I'm sitting there with, yeah, I do. But they got hung up on Earl Campbell, even though they said they did not want to use any celebrities, but Earl Campbell's son contacted them. And it looked like it was going to be an interesting show. And they asked me if I could help with the research on this. They're coming up with pretty much nothing. And that happens when you're looking at somebody that's from an era that connects almost directly to slave situations where getting the records is much harder unless you have some knowledge about what you're doing. And this was all new to us. So I contacted my son in Austin. And I said, could you go down to Tyler, Texas, and see what you can find on Earl Campbell, but don't tell anybody. And for those of you who don't know, Earl Campbell was a Heisman Trophy winner, and he's pretty big in Tyler, Texas.
Mhm.
Tyler, Texas is rather small, but he's pretty big in Tyler, Texas. And so my son went, and he looking all over the place. He said there are no headstones on the graves of any of those that were in the family tree. And I sent him some information. He looked at the library, and it had information on Earl Campbell, but not on history. And so it was pretty sad. And I was going through the census records, and I found some interesting things about the family there. But the show didn't want me pushing his mother's side as much as his father's side to stay with the Campbell name. And they came up with some things separate from me, and that was fine. But they still needed at least one more good story. A good story would be one that was like 10 minutes long, as opposed to one of the little 3-minute sets. And I said, well, I can get you a person whose 9th great grandfather was Roger Williams, who founded Rhode Island. And they said, well, first of all, they didn't know who Roger Williams was, but that was that happened a lot. I had one of the producers that was putting things together said, who's James K. Polk? I got 2 different people that say they're related to who's he is he? I'm thinking, oh dear. Well, apparently our school system needs some work here, but anyway, so I asked them if they would be interested. I said, I can get you this person, but I'm not going to even broach it unless you tell me that, yeah, you want it. And let me warn you that his last name is the same as your lead researcher's last name. So if Hibben is not a name you want to have up there more than once, you may not want this, but it's a pretty cool story. And they asked, I said, well, does he know that he's got this relationship? And I said, he's been told, but he doesn't know it. In other words, no proof has been shown him. It's just been family lore forever. And so they opted for it. And I contacted my son and I said, hey, how would you like to be on Genealogy Roadshow? Now that you've done this research for us, how would you like to be on the show? And he's, well, okay. My son is at least at that time was a DJ. He's still a DJ, but he has a real job as well. And DJ in Austin is pretty cool. Austin is, well, you all know what Austin is. It's weird, and it's good to be weird in Austin. So he fits the whole profile of Austin perfectly. And they said, yeah, let's do that. And I set it all up, and indeed they did it. But the problem on the first show was that with my son, at least, his section wasn't filmed until the very end, the last of the day. Well, most of the people that are there are people that know somebody that's on the show. So we've got all the family of these individuals whose stories are going to be highlighted. And then after a person's story is highlighted, the person leaves, and so does all the family. So with every person who's finished and leaving, you also lose about 5 to 10 other people. And pretty soon you've got no audience at all, or no people milling around like you may remember seeing on many of the shows. And so they discovered that they had to hire people to do that. Well, my son's segment, he's there, Josh is there, and apparently somebody operating a camera, but I don't know that anyone else was still there because it was the last one they filmed. So even his wife had to leave because in the middle of it all, her father died, or her grandfather died. And so it was just like a surreal experience for him, and I guess for me. But that was something that I found very Texas related. I thought, you Texans, stick around. Come on, don't leave. Stick around.
Jean, it's pretty funny that you bring that up, because I was there at that taping because Josh called us. There was a whole bunch of us from the Texas State Genealogy Society that went because of that very reason, that we knew that people were going to leave. And I remember when Earl Campbell came in, because all I remember was, he came in with his son and he was having trouble walking, and his hands were huge to begin with, but they were all bent up and everything, and then, but yeah, that was an interesting experience, the taping and everything, but you're right. Yeah. They asked us to stay there. People stayed, but people would leave. And it was a long day. It was a long
It was
day.
a long day. My son actually called when it was all over because I've been waiting and waiting and I didn't want to bother him. It was
And Jean and I are talking about Josh Taylor, who now is the director of the New York Genealogical and Biographical Society. So
yeah, he's gone into a lot of different directions with his career, and I think it's kind of interesting to watch how he's done. He's a great friend. I appreciate.
I've known him since you've known him since he was young, since he was 18 also. And
Oh
so,
well,
yeah,
you know,
I've known
you've
him
known longer than I
But
have.
anyway, enough about that. Nick, you want to take this? Jean and I could talk about a bunch of stuff. Nick, you want to take it back now? Yeah.
Well,
I think it's
do
about
wanna-
time to hand it back to Linda.
let me add one thing to that,
Okay.
because what we just mentioned about people leaving, in the next episodes, the next 3 episodes, they hired local actors, but what they forgot to do was say, you're not here to act, you're here just to mill around, maybe you talk to people, but you're just, you're kind of dressing on the salad or whatever. And these people came out. Went to the San Francisco one, which was the last one that was taped. And I tell you, people were in the oddest outfits. We have a soldier from the Civil War and a soldier from the Revolutionary War talking to each other. It was interesting to watch, but I don't think they made it on film because it was just a little bit too weird. Then again, maybe that's what they wore. It was San Francisco, so I probably should keep my mouth shut. Okay, I'm done.
Linda, you need to unmute.
Thank you, Nick. Jean, that was great. Thank you so much for your fabulous presentation. It was fascinating and enlightening, and I loved your handout because for many things, but it has a checklist, which I always need. So thank you very much, and also for the genealogy roadshow stories, because that was great fun, and we feel a connection to that. Sue, would you tell us about